Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Virginia Tech hosts Pittsburgh on Saturday evening inside Lane Stadium. How do the Hokies match up against a struggling Panthers squad? Find out next. It's episode 315 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Thursday, September 28th, 2023, from our high-tech Tech Sideline studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and please share the podcast with a friend. As always, let's introduce our football crew, the same crew as always. Chris Coleman to my right, Andy Bitter across the way, David Cunningham in the fourth chair, and Jack Brizendine is producing behind the scenes. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater, and we thank you once again for joining us on your Thursday as we get you set for Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh coming up on Saturday night. As always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Check out their new Checking with Perks account that comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more about this great new account for students. First, we go to Andy across the way. Now, Andy, you had some media availability throughout the week, and instead of going person by person, I just kind of wanted to throw it out there at you. Anything that stuck out? Seems like the Hokies getting a little bit healthier, maybe?
A little bit. We'll see. Nasir Peoples being out there this week, I think, is big. He was in the blue limited contact jersey, so that's not a great sign for Saturday that he's not fully cleared yet. But he hasn't been out there the last 3 weeks since getting hurt. I think against that ODU game, maybe re-aggravated something the following week. Not sure exactly when he went down there, but he has not been available. And you look at their safety situation. Jalen Jones wasn't out there the other day. He's been filling in for Peoples since he's been out. Mose Phillips is banged up a little bit limited to practice. Jalen Stroman has been dinged up this year. They just can't get healthy at that spot. And Peoples has played so much football. He's been such a veteran leader in that group. If they could get him back, that would be huge. But hasn't been cleared yet, so we'll see about Saturday. They've been playing Monsieur Delane a little bit at safety in practice for that contingency. They went 7-on-7 yesterday, and they had Monsieur Delane and Derek Canteen as the two safeties on the field. So they're clearly preparing for a situation where if those guys can't go. But if Peoples could get back, I think that would be huge.
What do you think, Chris? The addition of Nasir Peoples, how big can that be for Virginia Tech?
That would be big. I thought he played, he's a sixth-year senior. I thought in the time he was in the game for ODU, he was playing well. And ideally, you'd like to see what this defense can do with both of their starting safeties in the lineup. I think we saw that for all of 19 plays.
That's right.
Game of the season.
Because Stroma got the targeting.
The targeting, right.
So it's that quick. Wow.
Yep, it was that quick. So I would love to be able to see that at some point this season. I suspect we'll see it at some point. We just don't know when. I doubt it'll be this week. There are obviously there are other issues on the team. Linebacker play is a huge problem. There were issues at defensive tackle and defensive end against Marshall. But if you can fix one of the positions, then maybe you fix 1/4 of your problems.
Maybe. We'll see. I mean, it seems like it is an all-11 thing on that defensive side. Another thing, Jaden McDonald got a little bit more run in practice. He moved ahead of Will Johnson on the depth chart. The session we saw yesterday in 7-on-7, they had Jaden Keller at Mike and Jaden McDonald at Will. So all the linebackers played pretty poorly against Marshall. I think they're searching for an answer there. They actually put in McDonald and George Balance, the third stringers. I feel like out of frustration in the second half against Marshall when nothing was really going right. I think McDonald of those two has a chance to get on the field a little bit more, see a few more reps this week.
All right, well, we bring you our preview for the Pitt Panthers. How about this? Series tied all-time, 11 wins, 11 losses for Virginia Tech, split right down the middle between the Hokies and the Panthers. Pittsburgh, though, dominating as of late. They've won the last 3. They've also won 4 of the last 5 against the Hokies. Anything that you guys remember before we get into the X's and O's and some numbers here, just about these two going at it? Obviously played each other a handful in the Big East. Then once they rejoined in the ACC, this just seems like one of those teams that is always kind of a tough, gritty 50-50. You don't know what you're going to get kind of a game.
Yeah, I guess. Except, like you said, it's been 4 out of 5 Pitt. I think, especially when Tech goes to Heinz Field recently, you know exactly what you're going to get.
Acrisure Stadium.
Acrisure Stadium.
They changed the name.
You're right.
It'll
You're
forever be Heinz Field to me.
You're right. Same.
It's like Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. What is that nonsense?
Never, ever. Of course not. But in Lane Stadium, you know, it's kind of different. 2019, Tech won that game 28-0, pitched a shutout over Kenny Pickett's team. I remember that was pouring rain.
That was that Bud's last home game, I think.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Pitched a shutout in his last. He was
he
honored against Wake.
Wake Forest, but they played pretty well defensively in that game.
Right.
Then they pitched the shutout against
Correct.
Pitt. And right after the game, it's like, you sure you want to retire?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
this is still going pretty well right now.
Yeah, and then gave up about 35 a game over the next.
Yeah,
2
maybe
games,
the Virginia and Kentucky games are like, I think I'm ready.
I think I'm ready. Let's see, 2021. It was just Tech was outmatched in the trenches. I mean, they actually played well against Kenny Pickett that day. He didn't do very much. They just got smoked in the trenches, couldn't run the football. I think it was after that game where Fuente stepped in and said, "Okay, no more of this 4-back stuff. We're going to go with Malachi Thomas and Blackshear for the rest of the season." It was around that time that happened, and 2022. Yeah, let's not remember that one.
2020 and 2022, not the greatest. Or 2018 and 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, Virginia Tech has made Pitt look like just all-Americans across the front in some of these games that they've played. What was it? Kadri Allison and who else that just ran wild on them in 2018.
That dude was huge. I remember.
They averaged like 12 yards of play or something like that. Like, it was one of the most ridiculous averages for a game.
Will did the math, somehow did the math, got a hold of all the box scores in college football dating back to whenever. And it was I wish he was here, he could tell us, but it was the highest yards per play ever.
13.9.
13.9 yards per play.
They had 654 total yards and ran 47 offensive plays.
Right. And his Monday,
every play was an 80-yard touchdown.
In his Monday thoughts, I think that year he did, for that game, he did some sort of math where he figured out that was the most yards per play in a game between FBS teams since, like, as far back as the box scores go that he could find.
Yeah, for Bill Connolly, his SP plus,
right.
I think it was the biggest yards per play, Power 5 or just Power 5
right, okay.
ever.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been going back 15 years or however long he's been doing
Pitt
that.
ran it for 492 yards that day.
That was the most absurd game.
I remember.
It was almost the most absurd. And then 2 years ago, or last year, Israel Abanikanda running for 320. And it's like, okay, they make these Pitt running backs look like All-Americans.
The crazy thing about last year, or 2 years, last year? Yeah, last year. Like, all of Pitt's running backs were hurt, and even Abanikanda was like questionable for that game. They didn't know who they were going to play at running back.
Right.
So he was like the only one that they could play, and he just busted for 320.
And then I think 2020, Kenny Pickett had a huge game. That was like sort of Kenny Pickett's breaking out. I mean, he always kind of had that under the surface, but I feel like that's sort of when he started taking off. I know he had a really huge game. That 2020. I forget what the final stats were.
He threw for over 400 yards.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So whenever Pitt,
he was 35 for 52 for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns.
And I feel like before that he wasn't really like Kenny Pickett.
Right.
Like, that was almost sort of the birth of that. I'd have to go back and look at the stats and when he really kind of broke out there. But it feels like every time they play Pitt, certainly up there, somebody has some sort of record-setting day. Now, things are different when they're here, and believe me, I'm looking at these two offenses, and I don't think anybody's going to have a record-setting day tomorrow or on Saturday, but you never know. Sometimes offenses get healthy in this game when they're wearing the blue and gold.
So let's go ahead and take it there. Let's go ahead and start with the offense for the Pitt Panthers. And when you compare them to Virginia Tech, Chris, you kind of broke down the numbers for us. They are both very, very strugglesome offenses.
Strugglesome's a good word. Yeah, I think if you actually look at it in traditional stats, you could argue that Virginia Tech is slightly better than Pitt. If you look at the advanced metrics on the more efficiency ratings, Pitt is slightly better than Virginia Tech. Either way, you're talking about a Pitt offense that scored 6 points against West Virginia. They would have been under 20 against UNC if not for, I believe it was a kickoff return for a touchdown. And I forget who, Cincinnati, they were under 25, I think. So they don't score a bunch of points. Meanwhile, you've got the Tech offense averaging 16.67 points per game over the last 3 games. And I think, Pitt's averaging 17 points per game over their last 3. Tech is averaging 16.67.
So you're predicting 17-16 final score, is that what you're saying?
It wouldn't shock me at this point.
Well, didn't one of the West Virginia players come out after the Pitt games like, yeah, we knew their quarterback wasn't good. So it's just like straight up just said it.
Right.
Like he's
struggling.
These are 2 pretty bad offenses coming into this game.
The over-under is currently 39.5, which is like disturbingly low.
That's about what it was for Rutgers. Or I think for Rutgers it dropped a little bit lower than that before
Rutgers
kickoff.
almost covered it by himself.
I know.
So
yeah.
Well, the Panthers come in 1-3 on the year, 0-1 in conference play. Essentially the same record as Virginia Tech, but they have played an ACC game. That's a beautiful thing. If you want to find the silver lining, Virginia Tech is undefeated in conference play.
2 games ahead. 2 games in the loss column ahead of Clemson.
That's right.
Take that.
There we go.
Lapping Clemson in the standings right now.
Yeah.
Just like we all thought.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought, right? Well, let's go ahead, dive a little bit more into this offensive attack. Why not go for the Phil Jurkovec route and tell his backstory for those that might not know? A guy that was really good at Boston College, was kind of looked at as maybe one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC after he kind of had a breakout season, then struggled another year after that at BC, ended up entering the transfer portal. Fell upon Pitt, which made a lot of sense because he got to meet back up with his offensive coordinator that he had great success with. Chris, a guy that, maybe they can get the ball rolling a little bit now that he's back with his OC, but it hasn't looked like it so far.
He's been very bad so far. 51.1%, 583 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and he's only above 50% because I think he completed about 75% against Wofford in the first game of the season. Has been pretty bad. He had a really good year in 2020 for Boston College. 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, really strong pocket passer. He's had a couple of injuries since then, and I think that's hurt him, but overall, for whatever reason, he has just not been able to get it going ever since that 2020 season. Did lose his offensive coordinator, so you could say maybe that's the reason. But now they're reunited again, and it's not working out at Pittsburgh. So I do think there's some sort of deeper issue going on there. But at any rate, he has not played particularly good football since 2020, and he might not even play this week. So we'll see.
Yeah, he hasn't. No favors have been done by the health of his offensive line the last 2 years. I mean, BC was a train wreck last year with all the guys they had. Pitt has a ton of injuries. Was it Matt Goncalves, the left tackle, just been out for the year. They had a couple other guys that have been missing time. Starters up front. We'll see if either of them come back, or if I think Cradle, the center, possibly could come back here soon. I mean, that's just a struggle. He's not a mobile guy. He's a pocket passer that goes back there. He's been dinged up. We'll see if he goes. Christian Veillere is how you pronounce it, apparently. How the French say it. A guy who used to be at Penn State when Brent Pry was there, so he knows a little bit about him. I don't think their offense changes much if he goes in the game, but he's sort of an unproven guy. I haven't seen a ton of him in games so far. So I don't think their offense changes much, but I don't think their offense was going to be, radically better or worse if one quarterback's in the game or the other, because Jurkovec's just been so bad this year.
Pitt's offense kind of do the same thing every year.
Yeah, they're not going to switch it up.
Right. It is what it is. Even when Kenny Pickett was there, I doubt it was radically different than it is right now, except the level of play was much, much higher.
Well, they threw it when Pickett really got it rolling.
Yeah, they
and I forget the offensive coordinator they had who went to Nebraska after that record-setting year where Pickett's a Heisman finalist.
Yeah.
I was like, Kenny Pickett, Pitt quarterback, is a Heisman finalist. I remember seeing him the first couple of years when he played Virginia Tech, and I'm like, I just don't see it.
But he's got small hands.
Right, I just don't see it. Every year I'm like, they keep trotting this guy out here, and I just don't see it. And all of a sudden at the end, it's like, okay, they were clearly, I don't know football.
With the right offensive coordinator, he was a great player.
Clearly other people know football better than I do because they saw it and he broke out by the end. But, other than that, Pitt, Narduzzi wants to run the ball. He wants to be physical. And I look at Virginia Tech's defense and I go, I don't know if that's the kind of game they want to play. Having another team come in and just try to run it down their throat.
Definitely not the strong suit of the Hokies so far this year. Chris, how many times have you said that a good offensive coordinator can elevate a quarterback tremendously?
Lots. And I think I've realized that a lot more within the last 12 months.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, just breaking down a couple of Jurkovic's numbers here. I mean, some of it was staggering. Like, 17 for 23 for 214 and a tutty against Wofford. You should do that. Cincinnati, 10 of 32, only completing 31% of his passes for 179 yards. Did throw 3 touchdowns, 11 of 15. Now, he got knocked out of that UNC game, but no touchdowns and 3 interceptions against West Virginia, going 8 of 20 for 81 yards. I mean, that's just a really, really tough game. He's only completing 51% of his passes, 4 touchdowns to 3 picks, touchdown interception ratio. And again, we might not even see him. On the other side, when you go ahead and talk about their backup quarterback in Christian Veilleux, he did get a little bit of time at Penn State, played like a game or two. Chris, what did you see out of him in that?
He played a lot in one game against Rutgers back in 2021 when he was a freshman and did well in that game. But his only extended time this year at Pitt was last week against UNC, and he threw 2 picks and looked like it was no different than when Jurkovic was in the game. So that's why I think there's probably deeper issues. Like, obviously, he hasn't had very many reps. You can't, like, one game against Rutgers is a small sample size, but he did do well on that one sample size. And then Jurkovic has had the good year at Boston College and hasn't been able to replicate it. So I do think offensive line has been a problem for them, and didn't get any better now that they lost their best offensive lineman. So they're taking Ryan Bayer, who's listed as their backup at left tackle, but they're going to start him at right tackle and then move their starting right tackle over to left tackle. That's how they played it last week against North Carolina. They're still big up front, 330, 330, 305, 330, and 330, but they have not been playing well. And I think that, as much as anything, has impacted their passing game. But I also, like, it's not quite clear to me what the talent they have at wide receiver. Is it because those guys aren't very gifted, or is it because the quarterbacks are bad, or is it because the offense itself is just broken and so nobody looks good? I don't know. Unless I was watching Pitt every day, it's hard to form a strong opinion on that. But I just know when you look at the overall stats, that offense isn't working.
Well, Pitt always known for good running backs. That's kind of the MO of the Pitt Panthers, and no stranger to that. This year, that is one of the positives of their offense. If you can find one, Rodney Hammond Jr. leads that room. Kind of a stud out of the backfield.
I think Rodney Hammond's a good player. I think when you look at his career, I looked at all of his games where he had double-digit carries, and he's done well in those games, 4.5 yards per carry. He can't. There are times when they've called on him to be a workhorse, and he's been able to do the job. I would say that studying this game, Saturday would probably be another time where you want to go ahead and say, okay, Rodney, you're going to get the ball 20 times this week, and the backup's going to get it 10, at least, right?
He's only had 20 or more carries twice.
Well,
in his career.
Should be 3 if they're smart.
If there's a game for a Pitt running back to get healthy and break out, it's against the Virginia Tech Hokies. Just historically, that's what it's been lately. We should go back and look at what was their career best day for those former Pitt running backs. I know James Conner probably had a bunch of them because he was ridiculous when he was there, but I bet you that was Kadri Allison's best day. I know It was Israel Benacan's best day.
It wasn't that like 20 or 25% of his career yardage against Virginia Tech? Yeah.
I mean, that was, I forget the other back in that game, but he also had a big game as well. So Rodney Hammond, you might want to get the muscles loose for this one. I think he's going to be used a lot, and based on what we've seen out of Virginia Tech this year, eventually he's going to pop one, because that's been, sort of the Hokies' MO right now.
Yeah, I think patience is the key for Pitt. Like, it's so unlikely that Virginia Tech is going to score many points in this game. So Pitt's been inconsistent offensively, so I just think you got to just keep pounding the rock, maybe run some play action off of it and try to keep Tech on their toes and such. But generally speaking, keep pounding the rock. Even if you're not consistent with it, you're going to eventually bust a few. And so I think if you just get patient and make sure you don't get frustrated, and you just wait for Tech to screw up, whether that's not having run fits, whether that's penalties at critical times or whatever. Because it's like Tech doesn't have the offense to run you off the field, and probably doesn't have the offense to even take a 2-score lead at any point. So just stick to your game plan, and it'll eventually fall your way if Virginia Tech continues their current trend.
Well, knowing Narduzzi, that's probably what he'll do.
Absolutely.
Because he hates throwing the ball. Even when they were throwing it that year with Pickett, when he was doing great and he's like Heisman Trophy and 40 touchdown pass or whatever he had that year, he's still like, man, we're throwing the ball too much. It's like, yeah, because you're having success with it, man, and you're still complaining about this. I think you look at his background. He's Big Ten guy, defensive guy. I think he wants to run the football. I think Pry is kind of like that too, that he prefer to play that way. I don't think he has the personnel to do it, but that's just these guys' natures. Defensive guys run the football, don't put it at risk in the air, and I think they love to play that way.
Yep.
How do we feel about Narduzzi? It just feels like a situation, you hear a name like that who's had success. I mean, took his team to an ACC championship in recent history, and you just think when you look across the sideline where Virginia Tech's at, like, man, if it gets down to the fourth quarter and these two teams are going at it and it's close, like, they might have the ability to outcoach you. What are your thoughts?
I think he's a veteran, excellent defensive coach, 63-43 career record, I think, 41-26 in the ACC. Had plenty of success. You can't argue. I think he's a good fit for Pitt. And Tech fans don't like him, obviously, dating back to that 2016 game when he kept going nuts on the sideline. And he's not the calmest guy on the world on the sideline. Personally, like, I appreciate the bad guy role. Like, it's not any fun unless you have some villains, right? Like, it's not any fun to watch a Batman movie if he's just driving the Batmobile around and there's no bad guy, right? What's the point of even making a movie? So what's the point of even playing unless there's no villains on your schedule, right? So I think the only thing I could wish more is that, like, maybe he takes the West Virginia job or something like that. That would really make Tech fans hate him. Although
we don't play them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tech, they don't play him anymore, so that wouldn't work. But I think that would be awesome if it ever.
Yeah, he's a lunatic, and I love him for it.
Yeah,
because he's just like insane on the sideline. He's on the officials all the time. He kind of says what's on his mind at press conferences. Remember when Jordan Addison went to USC, and he's basically like, "Yeah, USC tampered."
Yeah,
like a lot of coaches out there, like they dance around and stuff. He just comes out and says it. I like that. He doesn't care. He really doesn't care.
Tech fans recently have this is what fans do when you start losing, is they start nitpicking your press conference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like nobody even noticed that Justin Fuente crinkled a water bottle until he lost 6 games in a season.
I don't know. I think people noticed it.
But they didn't complain about it.
It became a thing.
Yes, it became a thing
at that point.
So now they're nitpicking every single thing Pry says. Oh, he should be more honest and blah blah blah. Well, like, basically you're describing what you want from your head coach in a press conference. You're describing Pat Narduzzi. So Tech fans want Pat Narduzzi as head coach.
Yeah, and like he is so one-tracked with how he goes about his team. He's like, this is what we are, and we're not going to switch it up. Like defensively, it's like we will commit everything to the run and put our defenders on an island out there and beat us on 50-50 balls, and we will not switch that up whatsoever. To the point that Virginia Tech beat them one time with 3 100-yard receivers because that's the only thing that they could do in that game, just chuck it up. And Isaiah Ford, Bucky Hodges, Cam Phillips kept winning those 50-50 balls, and they 39-36 in that game that they won.
Those guys again.
I mean, just like the slightest alterations defensively, but he's like, nope, this is what we are. And you heard Brent Pry say it this week. They're simple. And that's not an insult. That's just to describe how they do it. They're simple. They do what they do. They're good at it. They don't really alter what they do. I think that's just, Narduzzi's persona. It's like, here it is. Beat us if you can.
They know who they are, and there's something to be said for that.
You mentioned Justin Fuente in press conferences. Do you remember that one after a bowl game where somebody said, like, Coach, sorry for your loss? And he goes, well, nobody died.
Condolences or something? It was after the Belk Bowl loss.
Yeah. It was after the Belk Bowl loss. It was the Kentucky one.
Yeah.
And I was there, and I know fans really get on Fuente about that. The way this question was phrased.
Oh, it was a bad question.
No, he was like, Coach, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like, he said it like somebody had died.
Yeah.
And maybe Fuente, his response, joking about it, was a little too gleeful.
It's okay, nobody passed away.
He did the, nobody passed away, and then he like laughed at himself, kind of weird. He's like, He did like
it was the laugh.
It was
that
like
was
the
so
Kawhi
weird.
Leonard laugh at himself, and I think maybe put it over the top. But the way that question was prefaced, it was totally the right response because he really did ask it like somebody had died. So yeah, I'll give Fuente a break on that one. Maybe not what fans want to see after a tough bowl loss, but the situation wasn't as bad as people made it out to be.
Chris, another kind of side piece. You had mentioned like, oh, it would be awesome if Narduzzi would go to West Virginia. Do you see West Virginia, just curious, like as a more desirable job than Pitt? I almost think Pitt, you play in an NFL stadium, they're like similar, but
I don't know if that's I don't think it really matters. I think they're similar enough jobs. I think there's unique things about each that I think they can both sustain the same levels of success with the right coach.
Right.
Now, that wouldn't happen. He's not going to go from Pitt right.
You never would,
West
yeah.
Virginia.
Well, I think Neil Brown's getting over the hump anyway. It feels like a little
they're better.
bit.
They're
Michigan
better.
State is open, though. Narduzzi did coach at Michigan State
Oh, you're
previously, so
right.
I wonder if
You're
that
right.
could be a possibility. I don't know if they want to revisit the past there, if they want to move forward with how they're doing that. I mean, that's a job that they'll pay a lot of money for a coach. So I'm
Yes,
curious to
clearly.
see what kind of coach they can land there. Maybe Mike Elko.
I was going to say they might.
Mike Elko is going to be a hot name for every coaching vacancy
no
this
doubt.
fall. So this winter. So we'll see.
I remember Carter Hill, who, I mean, everybody that's watching knows because he does this stuff with us. And he texted me as Duke was playing Clemson and they were like smashing him towards the end. He goes, all right, what SEC job is Mike Elko leaving for next year? You know, it just kind of had that feel
Somebody's
to it.
going to take a look. Somebody's going to throw a lot of money his way. And
Yeah.
Duke better be prepared to match it. And even that might not be enough.
Yeah.
You know, if Elko looks like, hey, I've maxed what I can do at Duke, it's time to move on to another
That
place.
has to be one of the toughest jobs in college football.
Absolutely.
Duke, no doubt. Let's see what, David, you got anything for us in the fourth chair?
Yeah, not specifically about Pitt. I don't think anybody it's funny. Before most podcasts, I post on the message boards and, hey, anybody have any questions? And sometimes it's preview. People want to know about Marshall. People want to know about Pitt. People want to know about the opponent. Every question I received this week, all about Virginia Tech. Everybody wants to know about the injuries, about what's going on. There are a few good ones. I have a question about the wide receiver room. Somebody asked, with injuries to Jennings, Gallo, and Lane, it seems like Tech's lost its top three receiving choices. Is Tech really any better in that room than last year? Seems like Benji Gosnell has replaced Nick Gallo's production, but not much from any of the others.
I don't think Gallo was going to catch many passes this year. I think like Wright. I would have always picked Wright to catch more passes than Gallo, but Gallo to be in there for run plays. Yes, he would catch a few passes, but I don't think he was going to go out there and catch, 20 or 30 or anything like that.
And Gosnell looks pretty good.
Gosnell,
at tight end. I've been impressed by him.
I think
so far.
he's got a good future. But as far as the receivers go, I still think they're better there last year than they were. Felton, has shown signs. I think Gosnell at wide
Steven
receiver.
Gosnell, he made that one-handed catch last week.
Yeah, I
it
think
was really impressive.
He was one of the bright spots of the offense. And there was another play where, he just basically ran a turnaround route, and just such a high quality play on his part. You see so many receivers, they don't come back to the ball on plays like that. And that's the hardest play for a receiver to make. You got a ball coming at you 100 miles an hour and you're going back towards it and you're catching it with your hands. And he did it perfectly, just like you draw it up. I do think Tech is improved at wide receiver, even without Jennings out there. I just don't think you're going to see it with Drones at quarterback. He's not as advanced passer as Wells. So I don't think, and that was always my concern is like when I saw, okay, Virginia Tech so improved at wide receiver this year. This is even if they had Jennings and Lane. I'm like, okay, so that's probably your strength on offense this year. So how could you start your quarterback that isn't nearly as good a passer as the other quarterback? Then you won't be able to take advantage of your strength of your offense. But I mean, that even applies now with Jennings out. I do think that the Tech receivers are better. It's just you would need the more experienced quarterback in the game to really prove that conclusively.
Well, last year they didn't really have a second receiving option. This year they have some other receiving options out there. So I think it's even as tough as some of the injuries have been, and I don't think Jalen Lane was 100% last week. I mean, Price said he was 85% or whatever he was. That showed up on the field a little bit. I still think with Felton, Gosnell, some of the younger guys that are coming along, I think there's more promise in that room, even if the production hasn't been a ton better than what it's been previously.
Andy, yesterday at practice we saw that Braylon Moore, what you described it as gingerly. He was moving gingerly. We got an offensive line question. Outside of Brody Meadows, is there anybody you think will get playing time this weekend at guard with the injury to Braylon Moore?
I mean, you would think if ever there was a time for Clayton Frady to make an appearance, this would be it. If it's dwindling options there. Trying to think of who else are even options there. Johnny Dixon, I guess, is also in there. Bring some fire. We saw him at that one practice, getting thrown out of that one practice. Maybe you need that for a game like Pitt, where it's going to be a fist fight
Tech
out there.
Doesn't hit anybody.
Yeah, maybe you throw him out there and see if he can rile up the other team, get them off their game. But I think Meadows will be the main guy. I would probably expect him to start just based on what I saw at Braylon yesterday. It just didn't look like he could move that well. But there's just not a ton of options. I mean, you get further down the depth chart, it gets younger and younger and younger, and I don't know if that's necessarily the way to go. But, Frady was the guy they brought in as a transfer. He's a veteran guy that they thought could play a couple different spots. Has he played this year?
He hasn't played a down on the offensive line. I don't know about special teams.
I mean, I feel like if ever there was going to be an opportunity with the depth chart where it is right now, this would be the week.
Some of these guys that transfer, you got to be really careful when you decide to hit the portal, especially when you're transferring up a level. He was a good player for Gardner-Webb, but he was not a dominant player. But you're still a guaranteed starter at the FCS level, which in the grand scheme of things is the third highest level of football out there. And he transfers up to try his hand at another level and hasn't played it down. So I wonder how that affects your thinking as a player. Do you sit there and say, yeah, I really made a great decision? I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Is it better to play at the FCS level or be on an FBS Power 5 team and everything that comes with that? I'd probably want to play, but, different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Anything else from you, David?
Yeah, I've got two other big picture questions if we've got time for that.
Let's run it. Or do we want to save it to the end? Up to you.
We can save it to the end.
Okay, we'll save it to the end. Well, the Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by Triumph NIL. Matter of fact, we forgot to replace their hat above Andy's left shoulder for a helmet. So, little plug for Triumph. A unique experience sports marketing agency specializing in building custom name, image, and likeness partnerships for student athletes. They've built out an amazing content network featuring student athletes and coaches. Visit triumphnil.com to learn more, subscribe, and support Hokies in NIL. All right, let's talk defensive side of the football, Chris. Some names to look out for. What do the Pitt Panthers offer on the defensive side? What could stifle the Hokies on Saturday?
Historically, Pitt is known for smallish defensive tackles, but very quick defensive tackles, and Narduzzi has made a living off that, sort of like Bud Foster made a living off of it. You hear people talking about Tech's defensive tackles are too small. Well, I mean, Pitt's starting defensive tackles are 290 and 285. I mean, it's not that Tech's defensive tackles are too small. They just haven't played well enough. I think they've got a good defense across the board. I don't know that you could say they have a star. I think their most consistent player so far has been Donovan McMillan, who's a former 4-star recruit from Pennsylvania.
Hokies in the mix for him
twice. In the mix for him out of high school, and he went to Florida. Tech might probably finished second or third in that, and then in the mix for him last year when he transferred from Florida, and we're probably very much in the mix then, but he went back to Pitt because that's, the hometown team and everything like that. Didn't get to play very much at Florida, but was playing pretty much an every down player for Pitt so far and has played pretty well. Big safety. I just think they're solid across the board. AJ Woods hasn't played as well at corner this year but he's played well in the past for them, and if there's any week he's going to get back on track, you would think it would be this week against the Virginia Tech offense. So there's just a lot of experience here. 4 seniors on the defensive line, 3 of them redshirt seniors. So the 2 defensive tackles are redshirt seniors, and their 2 backups are redshirt seniors. You got a redshirt at linebacker. You've got a senior, a redshirt senior, and a redshirt junior. I mean, in the secondary, you've got redshirt senior, junior, redshirt senior. Youngest player on defense is a redshirt sophomore, and there's just one of them. So it always seems like every year when you look up and down the Pitt depth chart right here, it's juniors and seniors all over their starting lineup. Narduzzi is very, very good about developing players and retaining guys I think, because I think it's really hard to build a team these days with a bunch of seniors and juniors, but he's been able to do it, and he's shown the ability to develop those guys over time. I know they're having a down year, so to speak, this year, but the season's not over, and there is a history of Pitt starting, 1-2 or 1-3 or 2-4, and then coming back from that to go on and have a good year. So they're in a situation that he's been in before as a coach, and he's got a senior laden team. And I know their offense hasn't been very good, but you see a lot of seniors and juniors on the offensive side of the ball too. So very experienced team overall. And I think their defense had a tough day stopping the run against Cincinnati earlier this year, but other than that, those guys have been good.
Yeah, I was going to point out the experience in the front seven there. The youngest guy is a redshirt junior. Everybody else is fifth year or fourth year or fifth year guys, sixth year possibly. I never worry about them reloading on defensive line. It seems like every year they put a lot of guys. Was it last year's Kalijah Cansey?
It was, and he was an undersized defensive tackle.
Yeah, and I mean, you look in the past, Aaron Donald,
undersized,
who's just like dominated the NFL.
Yeah.
When they took him, he was like the 12th or 13th pick in the draft.
Yeah.
I saw that. I'm like, he's going to be great for like a decade. And we're going to look back at that draft and all the people taken ahead of him and be like, what were you thinking taking these guys ahead of you?
He was like 12th in the draft, and then out of high school, he's probably 1200th.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they have a history of finding guys like that. They know what they're looking for defensively.
Yeah.
They have, and Pitt doesn't recruit. If there's a model for what Virginia Tech could become,
what Virginia Tech used to be,
right? Exactly.
Very similar to what Tech used to be.
They find guys that fit their system. They develop them. They're not all 4-star recruits, 5-star recruits, or like that, but they fit this defense and they develop them over time. And they lose a bunch of guys on defensive line every year, and they replace them with guys that can be good. And they just have this assembly line coming through there, and they always get after the quarterback. I think they're like 20th in sacks this year or something like that. They have a bunch of sacks. They get after the quarterback. I think they're going to be tough against the run. I know they haven't been great against the run, but they're not terrible against the run this year either. So, you better bring your big boy pads to this game, because if you're going up against this defensive line, it's going to be a black and blue game.
Special teams. Anything stand out to you? These two teams seem pretty even, really, in that category when you look at the national rankings.
We have a punt returner who has returned a punt for a touchdown in his career, and they have a kickoff returner, a true freshman, who actually returned a kickoff for a touchdown last week against UNC. So, yeah, there are things to watch for right there. So, in a game like this, it's going to be low scoring, most likely. We think it will be. You never really know. But it's probably going to be low scoring, and you can see it being a one-score game throughout. Like, one big play on special teams can be the difference between victory and defeat in a game like this. So special teams is always important, but like in a game like this, it's definitely something you want to keep an eye on.
You saw that in Purdue and Fresno State. Game really wasn't even close unless Purdue had that massive kick return. Yeah. And that's just one game that we happened to talk about on the pod earlier this year.
Massive kickoff return, and they also had a punt return to set up like a 17-yard touchdown drive. So they basically scored 2 touchdowns off special teams. And other than that, Purdue hasn't played well this year. And I'm not even going to say they played well against Virginia Tech, because you really have to.
Well, you look at both these offenses, like what could a 20-yard field do for these offenses? Like you get the ball and you're 80 yards from the end zone. You're like, all right, it's going to take a lot going right on this drive to get points. You get it at the 20 with an interception or a kick return or something like that. I mean, that could be the difference in this game, and in a game where I think touchdowns will be sparse. So special teams could be huge. The turnover thing, always huge. I think those are the really key areas in this game.
My argument to that would be is Tech struggles in the red zone a little bit, but
still,
I'd rather
be
there. I'd rather be there. Yeah, no doubt.
You can still kick a field goal. Points are points in a game like this. Take the points when you have the opportunity in this one.
Absolutely. David, what you got for us in the fourth chair before we play a little buy, sell, or hold?
Yeah, I'm looking it up. Gio, what do you think Virginia Tech's percentage in the red zone this year is?
Well, you got to think the first game they left some to be desired. I think in the first game they went 6 for 9, right? Something around there.
Sounds about right. I'm talking total red zone scores.
Total red zone,
like field goals count.
Field goals included. I'm gonna say we're like 78% in the red zone.
75%.
All right. 12
of 16.
Okay.
So
it's really not terrible.
As far as touchdowns are concerned, Virginia Tech is 7 for 16, so just below 50%. But you add in 5 field goals. This is a group that I think if you spotted them good field position, they'd probably find a way to score.
To get something out of it. The problem is, was it 16 possessions in the red zone in 4 games?
Yeah.
So
That's
And
for half.
nine of them came against ODU.
ODU.
Well, so that's a pretty low number for the last
a
couple
couple of
games.
those after turnovers.
Right.
Right. And a punt return.
Well, and to win games against good teams, you can't settle for field goals. Like, obviously, you're going to kick some field goals, but you'd like to turn the... Like, I felt like the ODU game, there were a couple of times that you're like, man, like, you would have liked to see him get 6 there because they were right there.
Well, I think it is interesting. Pry opted to go for it last week instead of kicking.
That was a 48-yarder, though.
Yeah.
It's not like it was guaranteed
Yeah.
points. And I like the
Sophomore kicker.
aggressiveness at that point. I didn't necessarily like the play call, and I don't know if the read was right, and maybe he could have tucked it and run it when you look at the coverage. On it. Everybody was covered on that play, so I don't know if there's anywhere to throw it. But they only rushed 3, so maybe Marshall baited them into that throw on 4th and 3. But I like the aggressiveness in that situation when your running game was rolling, the offense was kind of feeling it. If it's a 28-yard field goal, maybe I feel different about it. But 48. There's no guarantee you even get points in that situation. If you miss that, you give them the ball at midfield anyway. So
Correct. And he had just seen Love miss a 36-yarder the week before.
True. So I like that. I don't really knock him too much for that decision.
I don't either. Brandon Patterson broke that play down in his article for us yesterday, and they showed blitz. So it's like daring Tech to throw the ball, and then they backed out of it. But they did have. The way their linebacker backed up, he ran immediately to where the slot receiver went. And then they had triple coverage on the receiver that the ball eventually went to. It seemed like they had a pretty darn good idea of what they were about to bait Virginia Tech into. So I have no issue with going for it on that play. I have an issue with Tech's offense in general. I don't think the strategy was wrong there. I just think Marshall knew what to look for and knew exactly how to defend it.
I thought it was excellent defense considering you have an inexperienced quarterback there. Show like you're going to run right at him, drop out of it, and then he kind of threw it right away. And I would like to see him run drones there. 4th and 3, you like a big body, but
he's always got the option to run.
Yeah, that's true. Nevertheless, let's play a little buy, sell, or hold.
Sure.
Sounds good. We fared pretty decent last week. I mean, you guys kind of nailed it. You only had like 3 no's on the board and a lot of yeses as far as if you were correct in your picks, and almost everybody agreed for each one as well. So let's see if we can keep the positive momentum going. First question: Tech scores more than 20 points. Buy, sell, or hold?
Sell. I had him with 16.
David?
I'm selling.
I'm with you guys. Tech holds Pitt to under 185 yards rushing. Sell.
I've got to sell. I mean, I've seen the product the first couple of weeks, and I've seen the history with Pitt. I'll sell.
At this point, I got to see something before I'm actually going to see it happen.
Yeah, I'm selling.
Selling?
No
okay.
question.
So what would be your line on that? I thought 185. I was like, maybe I could get somebody
It's a good
trying.
line. I just, no matter what you put it at, I've got to see them do better than keep somebody under 200 before we start talking about 185.
All right, so I have a question.
Yeah.
How, when Pitt came to Blacksburg the last time in 2021, how many rushing yards did Pitt have?
Well, Kenny didn't have the best day.
161.
Abanikanda had a pretty good day. He didn't score a touchdown, which is kind of shocking, but
it was only 28.
Well, he made up for it with 6 the next year.
It was only 28-7. Pitt ran for 208 on the ground.
Wow.
So maybe you set the line like 210.
Yeah.
But that Tech defense was much better than this Tech defense. It wasn't a great defense, but it was much better.
But
against
that
the
Pitt
offense.
offense was much better.
was better. Yeah,
That's true. I'm going 222.
I like that. That's probably fair. All right. Tech gets a pick this week because Pittsburgh has thrown a lot of interceptions so far in 2023. Both their quarterbacks are responsible for picks.
Turnovers are so random that I got to hold.
Okay.
I'm going to buy. Yeah, I think they had one. Yeah, Mansour should have had one last week. To the one that that Fancher basically handed it off to Kelly Lawson on that one. I don't even know what he was looking at that. And then Keontae made a nice pick, but I feel like those corners are itching for one right now, and I think Mansour maybe regrets the one they dropped last week, even though it wouldn't have counted because of the interference. But I'll go by.
Keonta's was nice. That was a nice pick.
It was nice.
What do you got, David?
I'm gonna actually buy too. I think like this is an area you talk about, like areas Virginia Tech has improved from the beginning of the season. Like winning the turnover battle is huge. We talk about it before the season. Like you got to do the little things right. Tech won the turnover battle last week. Fumbled it once. Could have been twice. Could have had 3 picks instead of 2. But I think one of the few things the defense has done right is force turnovers a little bit more. I think Tech gets at least 1 this week.
So they've forced 5 so far this year. 3 against ODU. Then they didn't force any in the next 2, but then 2 this past week. So they've already forced 5. They forced 9 last season. So they're on track to force more this year. And yeah, I mean, last week was good that they did force 2 because, you know, in a close game, that +1 turnover margin can be the difference. It just didn't work out.
The
that
next
way
step
last
is
week.
capitalizing off those, getting points at the other end.
All right. Tech is able to hold Rodney Hammond Jr. to under 3.5 yards per carry.
Sell.
Whatever you put this number at, I was going to sell.
Okay.
So.
All right. Fair enough.
Which of the running game?
So,
No.
Okay. David, you sold as well?
yeah.
All right. Let's see. Tech runs the ball for 125 yards or more.
125 or more. I think they better. Like, if you've got a quarterback whose strength is running, then I think you've got to have a run-heavy game plan and shorten the game. Not that Pitt's going to score a bunch of points, but I mean, I think it's kind of the same plan for Virginia Tech. Like don't do anything to screw it up and just go out there and then see how the game breaks. I'm gonna go over, not by a lot, but I'm gonna go over.
You're gonna
I'm going to sell. I don't like this matchup. For
Okay.
them. I think the offensive line is going to struggle, and as a result, I don't think there's going to be a lot of room for the backs.
I'm gonna hold.
Oh, we got to buy, we got to sell, and a hold. I love it.
This is where the difference comes.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be close. Like Tech ran for 184 last week, 129 at Rutgers. I'm very interested to see how this goes. Again, that Pitt front is good, but the only thing Tech has really been able to do consistently with drones is run the ball. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
All right, I'm looking at the weather right now. It is looking like Saturday. It's going to be partly cloudy. It's going to be a nice night as of right now in Blacksburg. I was worried. I saw rain earlier in the week for Saturday, but
Weather's
it looks like
not going
that's
to be a
cleared
factor.
up.
It's going to be a beautiful tailgating day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So my question to you guys is so it is a sellout. Is this place actually going to be fully packed? 1-3 on the year, facing a 1-3 team. Do you think it's kind of like the corners are a little empty, or you think this place is going to be juiced?
It'll be spots of empties.
So you buy.
I think. But I mean, will it be any different? It's hard to judge because, like, yeah, packed house for ODU, first game of the season. The Purdue game with the weather obviously played a factor. I mean, it'll be a very good crowd. How many of them are still there for the second half? I don't know, especially in a game that doesn't promise to be very entertaining.
ACC opener, I'll buy. I think there's still enough. I don't know if I want to call it hope for the season, but there's still enough interest in the season right now. Maybe by the next time they play at home, maybe that's a little bit different if the record continues to slide.
I think the initial crowd at the beginning of the game is going to be really good because, I mean, who knows? Maybe this is the last. Well, no, you got your Thursday night game against Syracuse, but it's an opportunity for night game Inter Sandman, which is another level from day game Inter Sandman.
Oh, absolutely.
And everybody wants to experience that, right? Now, I expect large sections of the student section will be downtown or back home for the second half, is my guess, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm with them. I think the weather, like, it's still a bit warm. We're getting closer to fall weather, but like
Hoodie and shorts weather.
this is the opportunity for students to go to games and not have to worry about how cold it's going to be. Finally, like one last game, you get into mid-October with Wake Forest, and then you got a night game against Syracuse in late October, and it's going to be chilly, and you'll probably see the crowds dwindle a little bit. So I think people are still, especially with Pitt coming in, like, this is a game Tech fans I think will be up for. whether the team's up for it is a different conversation.
The weather's always funny in Blacksburg because the 2011 Clemson game was played on this weekend. I think it was September 30th. And or maybe October 1st, but whatever. It was so cold that weekend. It was between 35 and 40. There were snow flurries. The wind was blowing. At our tailgate, we actually cut off a couple of tree branches and set them on fire to stay warm. I'm dead serious. It was freezing. That was September 30th or October 1st. The same time, I've been to a Tech Miami game in Blacksburg on December 1st where it was like 72 and I wore shorts. You kind of never know what you're getting yourself into with Blacksburg weather during football season.
Awesome. All right, let's go a handful more here. Tech throws the ball for 175 or more.
Okay, so let me do math. If I picked him the over for running, so if I say yes, what was it, 120 or 125 for running?
We had 125 for rushing.
Okay, so I would go over. So let's say barely by 130, and then you over. How many did Jones throw for last week?
That's a good question.
You want me to
Let's
tell
look it
you?
up.
Yeah.
And I looked at his line.
He threw for 160 last week.
Yeah.
So over and under.
Under. All right.
I'm going to go under. So I'm under on both. I don't think it's going to be a
You
big.
think it's going to be a tough
I
offensive day?
And Andy's projecting a really exciting game.
That would be the bet, right? Like,
I mean,
what are you guys looking at this? Going to be a track meet between these two teams? Like, I don't see it. I'm going to stick with under.
No, I'm selling.
Under?
Yeah,
Okay.
and no question about it. I mean, especially I think this Pitt defense will bottle Tech up a little bit. I think the biggest key to this game, Virginia Tech offensively, is get Bashaw Tootin involved because he's been so good. I think that will come sporadically in the pass game, but as we've seen, Jerome's strength is not his arm; it's his feet on the ground, being able to move. I can't. He only threw for 160 at Marshall last week. Even with almost close to 100% Jalen Lane, I just can't see it.
All right. Is this a close game at half?
Bye.
I'll buy it.
Yeah, bye.
Close game at the half. Okay. At the end of the game, are we looking at a one-possession game?
Bye.
With my score prediction, I'll buy.
All right.
I'm also buying it.
All right. I like it. At least, okay. So
I
it'll
don't
be-
think either team is good enough to blow the other one out.
Well, unless there's like a plus 2 or 3 turnover margin on one
Right,
side,
right.
or a big return, something like that. But you can't really predict those things.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a theme here. Like, it's going to be close.
Yes.
It's going to be a one-score game.
It's going to be a dumpster fire. I
Yeah.
get it. Yeah. All right. So fluky play is the difference. So by that, I mean, you're talking somebody wins by 3 or 7 or 4 or whatever it is. But the difference is like late third quarter, early fourth quarter, special teams touchdown, defensive touchdown, or turnover. Like a fluky type play is the difference in this game. It's not that somebody goes out there and necessarily wins it on offense.
Hold.
Okay. Fair.
I mean, I'll say hold because
Yeah.
you can't predict that stuff. But I mean, you look at some of the tiny differences in these games. They're not always a big play like that. It's a penalty. It's a mistake in a certain situation that Virginia Tech's been doing these last couple weeks. I mean, you take away a couple of those penalties against Marshall, that could be a completely different game. So I think there are small things like that could happen that doesn't need to be this momentous play that changes the.
That's a
the tide.
really good point.
Do penalties count?
Yeah, let's throw
Yeah, all
penalties
right, I'm
in there.
buying-
Does that change your guys' answer if it's penalties?
No.
I mean, I'll still say hold because
Okay.
it's tough to
I'm buying
predict.
it.
But
Yeah, something. This is something dumb is going to happen. Two really bad teams. Something dumb is going to happen.
Winning on the margins is not.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
not something that
again,
Virginia Tech is particularly good at.
It's. I mean, it could be something as like I think back to like close games in Lane Stadium. It could be something as dumb as like a player running into a referee or somebody,
Running into a referee.
or
Like
like
hit out of bounds.
Yeah, I mean, just where somebody gets a 15-yard penalty or a fluke targeting penalty.
Have we ever seen that before? Like the game-winning touchdown is scored like on a passing play, and the linebacker gets picked by the ref or something. Has that ever happened?
I'm sure it has.
Well, I mean for Tech.
I
I don't know.
But I think that
it could happen.
I think
Yeah,
back
it
to one of
happened
those
yet.
Carolina games a couple years ago where I think it was Chamari Connor like ran. Tech was coming back off the field after like a 4th down stop, and Chamari Connor just like absolutely decked a UNC player. And it's like just there are little tiny things. Like, what if a targeting penalty? We have not had a targeting penalty in a while. Like
Since ODU.
yeah, so like a
That's a
targeting.
while. That's 3 games.
There were like 6 in the game
Yeah,
that they
it was-
reviewed.
I don't.
Yeah,
it's
a random event.
unpredictable.
So like Dax Holyfield targeting fourth quarter Notre Dame.
Oh,
huge
yeah.
play in that game, right?
That was-
And even like the year before or 2019 when Tech played at Notre Dame, that Jermaine Waller targeting was critical
Again,
to the outcome
that's
of that game.
that's so unpredictable.
Right, exactly.
All right, Phil Jerkovic plays in this ball game. Buy, sell, or hold.
He didn't finish the last game, and he's not playing well to begin with. So you're kind of maybe tempted to try the other guy for a week. And if you're going to do that, do it in a week where Jerkovic isn't 100%. I'll hold.
Okay.
I'll say buy.
I have to take hold out of it. That makes it less fun.
He played last week. A lot of time in between. I think he'll give it a go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he'll play a little bit. I'm buying it. I don't know how much, but he'll play.
Okay. All right. So Phil Jerkovic plays to Andy and David. Chris isn't quite sure. Pitt throws the ball for 175 or more. Again, same line as Tech. These teams really kind of mirror each other in a way on offense.
I think they're going to run it so much that they might not have a chance to pass for 175 unless they hit like a huge play or something. So I'm going to sell.
Sell it. I don't think they have a great passing offense. I think Tech's pass defense is pretty good.
All
So
right. Now, I did not get the opportunity to see your guys' picks, so we'll get to that at the very, very end. This is the last buy, sell, or hold before we get to the picks. This is the last sellout in 2023. Officially announced earlier in the week, hey, the game is sold out. This is the last one?
I've heard they're fairly close to selling out Wake. So,
Really? I'm
yeah.
surprised
I'm
not the
gonna
Thursday
sell-
night.
That's
I'm gonna sell that.
homecoming.
I
It's
think
a
they'll.
homecoming.
I think they'll
sell.
sell out Syracuse.
Thursday night, I think they sell that out as well.
I think I'll sell on this one. I think they have a better chance of selling out Wake than Syracuse, just because Saturdays are easier
Yeah.
for everybody to get to. Thursday with a lot of people that work are tougher too. But I think Wake homecoming. I think they'll sell that out.
I guess my mind just went to last year. West Virginia was like the first to sell out, and that was the Thursday night game.
that was
So
also
that's
West Virginia.
That's
Yeah.
That's an excellent
And
point.
Tech had only lost one game in the Brent Pry
Syracuse
era at
fans
that
are. I
point.
don't know if they're exactly going to come down in droves for this one, Gio.
I
They
got
might
like
be
I got like
unbeaten coming into
25
that game.
heaters coming down to
Good times.
Blacksburg for that
Jesus.
one. So at least the heater clan will be out in full effect. Last one for you guys. Tech wins this game, and I didn't see your predictions yet. So
Sell. I picked it 23-17 Pitt.
I took my shot last week with the upset, so I got to sell on this one. I said 1916 Pitt.
No. Yeah, sell. 2017 Pitt.
wow, have some faith, gentlemen.
I gave him a shot last week. He was partial. Look at me. I was like, fool.
I think Chris. I don't know about Andy, but I think Chris and I are on the same wavelength. Where, like, these are all winnable games. Virginia Tech has had opportunities and will have opportunities to be in just about every single game. We're not going to talk about what's happening next week in Tallahassee. That's going to be a dumpster fire. But Tech has had and will have chances in every single game it plays this year. The problem is the margins are so thin, and we saw last week when the Hokies had opportunities. You got a 4th and 1 and you got a false start when you can't afford it. Just little tiny things. I just don't think Virginia Tech, until Tech proves that it can get over that hump. Chris and I have both agreed that we're not picking Tech until we see them do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just so many. They find ways to lose football games. They beat Liberty last year in a very close football game, but other than that, you look at all these close losses or close games going back to last year. Almost all of them have been losses. So that's just not a situation where Virginia Tech plays well in. And occasionally you're going to win one of those by default, of course, but Tech has lost their last 9 games against Power 5 teams, which is now the longest streak in the country, right?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Northwestern
So
snapped it last week.
So I will pick Virginia Tech to beat another Power 5 team after I see them actually beat a Power 5 team. So that's my call for the rest of the season. Not sad. The Tech will win again this year, I think, but I'm
Gotta
just
see it.
individual matchups. I'm not picking it until I see it. They'll probably beat Wake because I'll be at a wedding in Charleston that weekend, so I won't even get to see it. But That's probably when they'll win.
I think they might beat Florida State, personally.
Do you?
No.
Yeah, I think they might beat Syracuse.
Chris, don't get me going. They will not beat Syracuse.
They probably won't.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm not going to talk about Syracuse. I don't want to get yelled at in the comments like I do every week.
Yeah.
Andy, anything else from you before we let everyone go?
Yeah, it feels like a bad matchup to me. Pitt is a punch you in the mouth kind of team. It's going to be a 4-quarter fist fight down there in the trenches, and I don't feel like that's this team's strength for the Hokies. The offensive line struggled to really push anybody around, and you've seen the rush defense stats that Virginia Tech's had so far. Even though Pitt's struggling, I can't get out of my mind those past series matchups, or maybe Pitt wasn't rolling coming in, they got things going just because of the style of play that they have. And then offensively, you're gonna have to win some 50-50 catches in the air. I don't know if that's a strength of this receiving core or a strength of drones throwing the ball necessarily. So just a lot of matchup things I don't like in this one.
Year over year, Pitt is the more physical football team than Virginia Tech. The only time that hasn't been true in recent years was 2019. But, 2018, did they even play in 2020? I guess they played in 2020.
Yeah, that was Pickett had a huge game.
That's right. Anyway, Pitt's more physical every year than Virginia Tech these days. And generally the more physical team wins. And until I see Virginia Tech play more physical football, I think they've made some strides on the offensive line. I think they've been steadily better there the last 2 weeks, but I haven't seen them improve enough to where I feel like that they're going to play well against Pitt. And especially when you look at the other side of the ball, I mean, that defense has just got to take huge strides before I feel like this is a winnable game. I think it's winnable. And I picked it to be a 1-score game because the Pitt's offense is so bad. But when it comes down to it, the more physical football team over 4 quarters is probably going to win. And unless there's a big turnover advantage or a big special teams advantage, I think that's going to be Pitt.
Tucker Holloway needs to rip one this week, sounds like.
Yeah, I mean,
He's been close.
Yeah, he has been. We just had him on the spotlight this week.
I think this is a good big picture question to end on. Somebody asked this on the message boards. Dave Brain, the athletic director during much of Frank Beamer's formative years, forced or at least encouraged Frank to change his staff, which in turn led to success. Does Whit Babcock seem like the type of athletic director that would similarly put pressure on Brent Pry to do the same if things don't turn around by the end of the year?
Well, I want to get into this a little bit, actually. This is a good question. All right, Whit has no experience in football. Tech's past 2 athletic directors were both former football coaches. So Dave Brand actually literally used to buy donuts and go in for Sunday morning staff meetings with the coaching staff.
Carol Lee Donuts.
Exactly. And you can find out a lot over breakfast with Carol Lee Donuts, right? And so he was able to sit in there after games and identify, as a former football coach, as a guy who coached at UVA, as a guy who coached at Georgia Tech, major programs here, he could identify that staff wasn't good enough. And Jim Weaver played at Florida, I believe, and was a former football coach before he got into administration. Like, he knew the things football coaches needed to succeed and things like that. And I don't think there's anybody here in the administration at Virginia Tech that is capable of doing that. Whit never played football. He doesn't have an associate AD for football. I mean, technically Belen, I guess you could say, but he's only ever been under one person. Well, he's been under 3 people now, technically, but it's just, you need a little more outside experience, I think, with other staffs and things like that. I don't think, if changes need to be made at the end of the season, I don't think it'll be because Whit Babcock forces it, per se. But another thing that Dave Brain did was, he knew Phil Almashin. So when Frank decided, or it was decided for him, or whatever, Phil Almashin told the story. It was it was Dave Brain that called me, the athletic director. Dave Brain had an established relationship with Phil Almashin because he had been a coach for a decade. And he knew him. Maybe he coached with him. I don't remember. But, that's not something Whit can do. So I think it's, do I think they're going to need to make some changes at the end of the season? Yes. But that's probably not something the athletic director needs to get involved with except for signing some checks.
Yeah, I mean, it's early in the season, so we'll see how the season plays out. But I think if there are going to be changes that need to be made, that you don't get 4, 5, 6 years in this current climate. And I think as a head coach, you realize that. If you start out struggling this much in the first 2, you go, man, I might have 1 or 2 years left possibly before they make a change if I don't start to make changes. So I think there's sort of that internal clock with coaches these days that they know that they've got to switch things up. It's not like the 80s and 90s where you had a long time, you got a long leash with that stuff. There's so much invested in these football programs now that if it's not working, you do have to make changes. Now, I don't know if it's going to get to that point. Again, you have a whole ACC schedule to play out here, but we kind of see how things are trending and what the odds are in some of these games. I think it could get to a situation where they do have to do some stuff.
All right. What's coming up on TSL this week before we let everyone go?
You doing a
mailbag today?
Yeah, so I'm doing my
some
Q&A
lively
Friday.
questions.
Yeah, I bet there is
on the message
Yeah,
board. So
yeah. Sure, man. The same stuff as usual. I guess Brandon Patterson will have an article breaking down Pitt. Although at this point you can probably read his past breakdowns and say this is kind of what Pitt does. Doesn't change very much except the personnel. But yeah, typical week of content.
Cool. Anything from you, David?
No, we're good.
All right. Sounds good. We'll also have, as far as video goes, let's see. Spotlight came out yesterday. I'll be down on the field with the package out on Sunday. So be some fun stuff on the video side of things. And that wraps up our show. So for Jack Brizendine, producing behind the scenes, for managing editor David Cunningham, senior staff writer Andy Bitter, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. We'll see you on Monday when we talk about this game between the Panthers and the Hokies, 8 p.m., prime time in Lane Stadium. You can watch it on TV on the ACC Network. You can listen to Bill Roth and Mike Burnup on Learfield, or you can go to the game as well. It's a sellout, a whiteout in Lane Stadium. Enjoy the weekend.